forgot the mirror, but I got it. I went back and got it.
Can't forget the mirror.
Some flyaways today.
From the Victory Studios in downtown Little Rock, this is Capitol View.
And good Sunday morning to you. Welcome to Capitol View. I'm Jay Burr. Attorney General Leslie Rutledge is part of 9 attorneys general that have filed an amicus brief against the Pennsylvania Supreme Court voting case. And she's here to tell us now about all of that and what exactly an amicus brief even is. Attorney General Leslie Rutledge, we certainly appreciate the time as always. So I guess first and foremost, I know everyone's dying to know what exactly is an amicus brief.
It is a friend of the court brief, and so essentially what we have done, the state of Arkansas has joined 9 other states in filing a friend of the court brief with the U.S. Supreme Court, asking them to look at what the Pennsylvania Supreme Court has done. Essentially, we're stating that the Pennsylvania Supreme Court ignored the legislature in Pennsylvania by stating that those laws that were in place were no longer in place and that they were going to write the election laws and accept ballots for 3 days after the election. So these 10 states are asking the U.S. Supreme Court to tell the Pennsylvania Supreme Court that they were unconstitutional in their actions and to go back to the drawing board and let the laws of the state of Pennsylvania decide and not for the courts to decide.
Now would this actually end up changing anything election-wise, or were there enough ballots to make up that difference there, is I guess what I'm trying to ask?
Well, I think it's important that this be a fair and transparent process. And when you have courts or individuals changing the rules, particularly at the 11th hour, such as what the Pennsylvania Supreme Court did, it very well may not change the outcome of the election, but we should still have a clear, transparent process and all legal votes counted and all illegal votes not be counted. But what we can't have are for votes come floating in absentee ballots with no postmark date on them. The election ended on Tuesday, November 3rd. However, they were accepting absentee ballots without a postmark through that Friday. Well, were they mailed Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday? When were they mailed? And I think Americans, not just in Pennsylvania, but Americans deserve to know that elections are carried out fairly, accurately, and by the law.
Now, I know you're one of the big ones in the, I might get it wrong here, but is it Lawyers for Trump?
Correct. So okay. I'm the national co-chair of the Lawyers for Trump across the country. And what we did was recruit attorneys to work with the campaign, to be poll watchers, election watchers, to be on hand, available in states if there were in fact issues. Right now, most of the litigation that is being handled has been handled by firms that the Trump campaign has hired. That is not being handled by the state attorneys general, for example. And that's why we are working and together, again, these 10 states to file that amicus brief in Pennsylvania, well, with the U.S. Supreme Court on Pennsylvania.
I guess overall here, because a lot of people are going to think like, oh, Trump's being a sore loser, this thing's pretty much wrapped up. But I think to your point, kind of where you're saying is you want these things to be transparent. And I know there was a lot of instances or here and there, or even alleged instances where maybe things just looked deceiving.
Well, Again, I think it's fair to say there has been election fraud across the country ever since we've had elections. We have got several instances where someone has filled out a ballot for another person. I've been contacted by people who their loved one had gone to vote and someone had already voted in their place. So we have had election fraud, and we've also had elections that have been changed because once the courts got involved and they saw where election officials had conducted things inappropriately, they changed the results of the election. That very well could happen here. We don't know. I don't have a crystal ball, but I know that this president and any candidate for office deserves to have a fair election. And that's paramount to our country. It's paramount to our state. And so all we're asking as the Trump campaign, all the Trump campaign is asking, this president is asking, is for the courts to decide whether or not these officials in the various states conducted those elections properly. Was there fraud? When you're showing up with boxes of ballots on election night or after election night that no one can account for, I think people deserve to know where those ballots came from. Were those people actually voting? Mail-in ballots are wrought with the opportunity for fraud, particularly when you're mailing out ballots in masses without people requesting them. Here in Arkansas, you had to request an absentee ballot.
Sure.
Some of these states, it was just a mass mailing. Think about how many times people have moved over the course of their lifetime. If you're in an apartment complex that is known for being transient, you could end up with 10 ballots mailed to that one apartment complex. Most election officials don't clean off the voter rolls even when people have passed away. Several instances of individuals who are no longer on this side of heaven voted in the election. That's unfortunate, and someone needs to be held accountable. But first and foremost, the American people need to know that this was a fair election.
I think that's kind of really the crux of it all here. I guess as part of Lawyers for Trump, are there any other states that you guys are kind of, I don't want to say honing in on, but maybe double checking into some things with?
Well, I think we're certainly looking at Georgia. We're looking at Arizona, Nevada. Adam Laxalt, who's the former Attorney General in Nevada, has been leading that effort in the state of Nevada. We're looking at how the close states, as I said, Nevada, Arizona, Pennsylvania, but all across America, we have seen instances where election officials played as if they were in charge, king and emperor, and we need to know that Leslie Rutledge, I want to know that my vote counted. And Jay Burr wants to know his vote counted, and every American feels that way. However, if you have, again, boxes and boxes of ballots being brought in and no postmark, then how can the American public rest assured that the process is fair? And all this president is asking is that this process be carried out, that the courts decide if anything illegal was done and those illegal votes not be counted, and count the legal votes, and whoever the winner is, the winner is. And we will have a president inaugurated on January 20th.
Yeah, it's just a matter of which guy is it going to be, but it's going to be one of those two fellas. Well, we certainly do appreciate the insight here. I know this is confusing, and it gets a little politically rhetoric when you start bringing up one side or the other, or even the process, but we certainly do appreciate a little bit of a breakdown here going on.
Absolutely, and I think it's, that we do need to let the process play out, and that my friends across the aisle, I ask them to be patient. I have read columnists, even in Arkansas, that have called Donald Trump the illegitimate president for 3.5 years. And so I think it's only fair that we let President Trump and his team the process to play out. And before I go, Jay, I do want to ask that Arkansans keep the family of the West Helena officer who was killed last week in our hearts and prayers. Our men and women in blue, we can't say thank you enough to them. And it's just absolutely heartbreaking when one of them is killed in the line of duty.
Yeah, never an easy thing to break, and we know you're so connected with that agency, or not necessarily the agency, but just that world in and of itself. Attorney General Leslie Rutledge, Boss Lady, you're welcome back in here anytime.
Thank you, Jay Burr.
All right. Well, Governor Hutchinson reveals his proposed budget for next year. When we come back, we break down those numbers. You're watching Capitol View on Sunday morning.
Morning talk focused on the political scene in Arkansas.
And welcome back to Capitol View. Governor Asa Hutchinson presented his proposed budget for next year, and it includes a major increase in funds and ups the current budget by $161 million. The final price tag, $5.84 billion.
The balanced budget submitted today is based upon a revenue forecast for FY 2022 of $5,859.4 million.
Governor Hutchinson did not go into great detail about much of his proposed budget, leaving some lawmakers still curious as to how all the pieces fit.
Lots of questions to ask. You know, the governor's made some proposals that we have lots of questions about.
The governor restored many of the COVID cuts to education, healthcare, and public safety. There were also some unexpected tax cuts for lawmakers in his proposed budget.
One of the ideas is increasing the exemption for used cars from the sales tax.
This was a bill that died in the last session, but seems to have more support as a tax cut for moderate to lower income earners.
Because those are the people that have sales tax hits them harder than it does a higher income.
Another interesting tax proposal Governor Hutchinson floated today was that new residents to the state would pay a lower tax rate than established residents of Arkansas.
My district, would be honest with you, would hang me high if I voted to let somebody who just moved in have a lower rate than someone who'd been here for years paying taxes.
The governor said this would help in recruiting talent for tech jobs and manufacturing, also retirees. The goal is to get all Arkansans to that rate soon.
The goal is to reduce the rate for all Arkansans to 4.9% over the next 5 years.
Adding to the state's long-term fund and an additional $50 million in tax cuts are on the table, but lawmakers will have to make it happen.
And have plenty to talk about come January.
Yep, and all the way through session.
And again, those are just proposals by Governor Hutchins. They must be approved by the General Assembly in the next general session. That starts on January 11th. Now, those are some big numbers, and we needed a guy with a big brain to help us digest all of this budget stuff. So we brought in Assistant Professor of Economics, Jeremy Horpadal from the University of Central Arkansas, one of the best mustaches in the game on top of that. So that's just an added bonus for us here. But I guess the one big thing that really sticks out to me is the tax cut proposals. I mean, obviously, you know, all your A, B, and C columns being refunded, that's kind of a big deal too. But really the tax cuts, considering, you know, what this last year was like, you would have thought maybe be a little weary of tax cuts. But here we are.
Right. Thanks for having me back, Jay. It's great to be back here. So, yeah, I think the tax cut, it was a little surprise to I think a lot of us, even those that follow this pretty closely. The governor has had a long-term goal of getting that top tax rate on individual income down to 5%. Mm-hmm. I guess now 4.9, a little bit lower is nicer, I guess. But that's been kind of a long-term goal, and he is now saying, looking to do that in the next 5 years. I think you're right that, you know, given the uncertain budget times, it is proceeding with caution, right? There isn't actually a proposal in this budget to do that. It's kind of a goal. But then the kind of little taste of that goal he's giving is we're going to do it for people that are moving here. So someone who's a new resident is going to get that lower rate immediately. At least that's his proposal.
And it's a little fascinating, and I know we don't know all the nuts and bolts of that yet, but you know, how would that act? Is that sort of a thing where if you get more people to move in, paying that number, is it kind of one of those things where it might work out in the end where you actually make more off a lower rate?
Yeah, it's possible you could. It depends on the numbers because there are 30,000 to 40,000 people that move to Arkansas every year anyway. Mm-hmm. So you can't really distinguish between the ones that came because of that, you know, that lower rate and the other ones. So you have to give it to everyone, right?
Right.
So they're estimating, you know, in the first year, it's a cost of $1.5 million because they know that you're having that lower rate for everyone. But if it does attract a lot of people, then it actually would be more revenue, right? So it depends on whether that actually does entice, you know, a lot of people to come that wouldn't have come anyway.
And I guess just kind of digesting the budget as a whole here, you know, is there anything that really stands out to you? I mean, because like I said, I think just refunding everything after all the COVID cuts, I mean, we're talking about like $350+ million in cuts. I mean, obviously it was a different time then, but now it's kind of like, you know, we're sort of operating as normal.
Yeah, I mean, part of the way you can think of this budget is a way to get back to funding things the way we were funding them before COVID affected our lives and the state budget and everything else. You know, higher education, the business that I'm in, that had some of the pretty significant cuts up front when we didn't know how bad it was going to be. The hits to the state budget actually weren't as bad as we initially thought. So this is kind of, now we're saying, okay, now we can fund these things. It seems like we're going to have enough revenue. I think it is, you know, interesting that he is proposing, you know, it's a 2-year proposal. They always propose 2 years, and to get over $6 billion by the following year, 2023. So, you know, that's a pretty significant increase of what it was before the COVID times, right? So, and again, everyone realizes there are uncertainties, and if the recession returns next year, they'll have to revise. But this is what they think is the best projection based on the data right now.
And I know you're a big proponent of this, is that long-term reserve fund. Now, nothing specifically for this year being put into that. I mean, obviously that can be kind of worked out, but Governor's saying, and he's got a bit of a bold plan to be about $420 million by the end of this biennium.
Yeah, that's another important part of at least the proposal in this budget is to greatly increase that long-term reserve fund. And we've talked about this before. I think back in early March, before all the everything
happened,
started, that was the topic of the day, right? But we talked about that, and there's about 185 million in there now. So he's talking about more than doubling what's in there. And I think that's a very prudent thing to do, especially given that we've just seen a time when the budget got really hit hard. Now they didn't have to dip into that this time because it ended up being not as bad as they had thought. But it's good to have that reserve there, not only to protect the budget, but also it helps your bond ratings so the state can borrow at lower rates. So that shows that you have the money to meet your obligations in case of an unexpected downturn. And I think that's a good proposal, and I think that it would be good to have kind of regular deposits into that as a kind of budgetary rule, something we've talked about before, as another way to improve that. Although, as the governor said, there was nothing in there when he started, so he's really built it up, but we think that, so it's good to keep putting that money in there.
And another interesting thing here, and I know we have to tend to separate things out here, but also $25 million for this year. And I don't know if we can throw the graphic up real quickly on kind of what we're looking at there, but not the long-term refund, but it's a fund transfer into general revenue. I guess what's sort of the difference there as we kind of get into sort of the minutia of that?
Yeah, so I mean, there's all these different accounts, the government uses to kind of separate things into this is for general, these are for specific things, right? So there's a surplus. Actually, it's kind of weird to be talking about this now, given the hard budget times. But they actually have a surplus built up from last year, and to some extent being better than the revised forecast. So there's a bit of a surplus. So he's talking about how we're going to use some of that money, and some of that is possibly going to go into the long-term reserve fund. Some of it might be used for additional targeted tax cuts. So not the big get the top rate down to 4.9, but maybe some targeted low and middle income tax cuts. But the governor's been pretty vague on that. Is going to leave that up to the legislature to figure out if they want to do that, and if so, what would they look like.
All right, so I don't know about everybody at home, but I feel a whole lot better after looking at this spreadsheet here. It's a lot of commas, it's a lot of numbers, and they're all jam-packed in there together. Jeremy Horpedahl, assistant econ professor up there at the University of Central Arkansas. We appreciate the insight, and hopefully we'll do it again.
Great, thanks, Jay.
You betcha. All right, when we come back, we talk to the executive director of the Arkansas Scholarship Lottery about how they've been able to keep the ship afloat during the pandemic. You're watching Capitol View on Sunday morning. Let's do it.
You're watching Capitol View, Sunday morning talk focused on the political scene in Arkansas.
And welcome back to Capitol View. Despite a pandemic, the Arkansas Scholarship Lottery raking in the cash. But how? Joining us now via the Zoom is Executive Director of the Arkansas Lottery, Eric Hagler. And boss, we certainly do appreciate the time. I guess just first and foremost, how on earth is Arkansas able to do this? I mean, we're seeing, these numbers going up and up and up despite, kind of what the world is right now.
I think part of the reason, Jay, is people have limited entertainment options right now. And the lottery provides an entertainment option that doesn't require a whole lot of investment of time, and the monetary investment even is depending on the player, not that great as well.
And how have you guys been able to capitalize on that? Because obviously, you've got the marketing and the advertising, things like that. But, how do you kind of keep it fresh, keep it going for a lot of these folks? Because I know, too, especially you guys have hit sort of the wall with the big draw games and the Mega Millions and the Powerball. They just haven't quite performed the way they have in years past.
It's true. They haven't. And Arkansas is fortunate in that we're less reliant on the multi-state draw games than a lot of the other states are. 80% of our sales are instant scratch-off tickets. And they're, again, easily purchased. It's a low commitment of effort, time. And I think that's been a real key. And so when you look at some of the other states, such as Louisiana, who rely heavily on draw games, they've been more impacted than the Arkansas Scholarship Lottery has.
Now, we've got a graphic up here right now, kind of going through some of the numbers here. And I know these two right here are some big-time milestones for you guys. $1 billion in proceeds for scholarships, and that happened just this past week. And also 600,000 college scholarships have been awarded in the state of Arkansas in 11 years of the Arkansas State Scholarship Lottery.
It's amazing. Those are amazing numbers, and they're numbers that we're proud of. one of the things that we always try to remind ourselves and others of is that the mission of the Arkansas Scholarship Lottery is to maximize those proceeds and to do it in a responsible way. So there's a balancing act that goes on. While we certainly encourage people to play our games and the funds that we receive, the revenue generally goes to funding scholarships after expenses, you're always looking for a little bit of a
just something there.
It is.
Yeah.
Right,
yeah.
Jay.
It happens to the best of us. Now, I guess too, with the pandemic the way it is, I guess how much has the big draw games, the Mega Millions and Powerball, how much has that really cut into things? Because you said, it's only about 20%, maybe even a quarter of your guys' revenue, but really, how much is that really eaten into things?
Well, it's an impact, and I think it's an impact for all lotteries. There again, we're fortunate in that we're not heavily reliant on them. The big jackpots having gone away have driven players to a different form of game. So natural state jackpot, which is exclusively available in Arkansas, that's seen a benefit. And then, of course, obviously the instant tickets have benefited as well from that. But we are seeing kind of a reset in jackpot expectations. So while you see a reduction in Powerball and Mega Millions, the multi-state games, we're starting to see a little bit of a change in those games as well. So there could be some things going forward, such as number of days that you see draws in those games, things of that nature that we think will bring the excitement back to those multi-state games. But also we believe that players have adjusted their jackpot expectations such that the day and age of the excessively big jackpot is essentially over for the moment at least.
Well, that just breaks my heart to hear that, because I could spend $700 million real quick, for sure. But I guess too, when it comes to the scratch offs here, I mean, what are you guys trying to do to sort of keep that thing fresh and enticing? Because there's, like you said, there's all different types of players with that, because you've got your $20 cards all the way down to like your $1, $2 types.
It's true, and our gaming department, it does a wonderful job of trying to keep our portfolio of games fresh. We've got one right now that is a 1 million spectacular. I'll hold it up and show you a copy of this. This is the ticket that you want. There are 3 top prizes of $1 million, and there's $33.5 million in prizes total. So the $1 million spectacular, that's the one that I would point you to.
All right, and I guess overall with all this, you guys are meeting and exceeding budget expectations.
We are. We're well ahead of budget. You're starting to see a little bit of a headwind, Jay, in that people, I think, are a little bit uncertain about the future, and especially with regard to the pandemic environment. But one of the things that we've done is there again, we've had consistent distribution of our tickets. There's been a great appetite for that. We look forward to the future, and there again, I would point back to the fact that historically there's been some criticism about Arkansas being so heavy in the instant sales, but I think in this instance that actually has benefited us greatly, and we're fortunate that we have the players we have, and we look forward to providing them with new and exciting games.
And that's the name of the game here. Executive Director of the Arkansas Scholarship Lottery, Eric Hagler. Boss, we certainly appreciate the time, and anytime you got some insight to those winning numbers, just go ahead and shoot them my way.
Absolutely, Jay.
All right, boss, we appreciate you. And we are back to wrap it up after this. You're watching Capitol View on Sunday morning.
Sunday morning talk focused on the political scene in Arkansas.
Well, we need your help getting ready for our Thanksgiving show. We're asking any and all elected officials to send in videos saying what you are thankful for this year. It's probably going to be a lot, but that's okay. Email those videos. You see them on the screen, and that, ooh. Oh, there's a misspelling? Oh, okay. I was like,
You're watching Capitol View, Sunday morning talk focused on the political scene in Arkansas.
Well, we need your help getting ready for our Thanksgiving show. We're asking any and all elected officials, send in your videos saying what you are thankful for this year. It's probably going to be pretty loaded, but that's okay. You see the email addresses right there, so send them on our way. That is going to do it for our show this week. Make sure you get the Capitol View podcast wherever you consume your podcasts. There it is, right there. Enjoy the rest of your weekend, and we will see you back here next Sunday.